Unit 7, Probability, Lesson 1. Probability notes. So the key words are probability, which is a measure of the likelihood or chance that an event will occur. Outcomes are the possible results of an experiment. An event is an outcome or a collection of outcomes. A sample space is a set of all possible outcomes. A tree diagram is a visual way to find the number of outcomes. A tree diagram is not a good method to determine number of outcomes if you're dealing with a large number of possibilities. The counting principle is a mathematical way to determine the number of outcomes. And a simulation is an experiment that you can perform to make predictions about real-world situations. And we'll go over all of those throughout the course of this unit. There are two types of probability. Theoretical probability, which is number of favorable outcomes over total number of possible outcomes. For example, a dice, the probability of rolling a 1 on a dice would be a 1 out of 6. So that would be the theoretical probability, 1 over 6, versus experimental probability is number of successes over number of trials. So, for example, theoretical probability of rolling a 1 could be 1 over 6. Experimental probability, you roll a dice 6 times and you see if that number is 1, maybe it's 0, maybe it's 2, maybe it's more than that. So that's the difference between theoretical and experimental probability. Odds versus probability. So probability, again, is the measure of the likelihood or chance that an event will occur. Odds compare the number of favorable and unfavorable outcomes. When determining odds, you do not use the total number of outcomes. That's just for odds. Probability, you do use the total number. So odds in favor, so number of favorable outcomes, number of unfavorable outcomes. So if you're thinking of rolling a 1 on a dice again, the number of favorable outcomes would be 1. Number of unfavorable would be actually 5, because rolling a 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 would be unfavorable outcomes. So that would be a 1 to 5. Versus the odds against rolling a 1 would be 5 to 1. Unfavorable outcomes to favorable outcomes. Okay. Outcomes here. So we're going to come up with the number of possible outcomes in a sample space. So you toss a coin. Toss a coin, it can be heads, it can be tails. So the total number of total possibilities is 2. Okay, a bag contains 5 blue cards and 4 red cards. So you would multiply 5 times 4, there could be 20 possible ways. So if you're picking 2 cards out of there, it'd be 20 possible ways there. You toss a coin and roll a dice. So possible for coin, again, we know is 2. For dice is 6. So toss a coin and roll a dice would be 2 times 6, which would give us 12. You toss 2 coins, so you'd have heads or tails, heads or tails. So we got 2 and 2. 2 times 2 is 4. You want to select a person at random in your family. This answer would vary depending how many people are in your family. So I have 4 people in my family, so that would be 4. If you have 5, it would be 5. 3 would be 3. 2 would be 2. It depends how many people are in your family. Okay. So we're going to take a look at a couple questions here. Theoretical probability. So this is the theory. We're not doing experiments yet. We'll do that next day. Theoretical probability, we use the spinner at the right to answer the questions below. Express each probability as a fraction in lowest terms. So it asks, what is the probability that the spinner stops on red? So we see there's a total of, let's count how many options there are first. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 total possible outcomes. And how many are red? 1, 2, 3. So the probability that the spinner stops on red would be 3 out of 8. And number 2 says, what is the probability that the spinner stops on a color other than blue? So how many blue is there? 1. So that's pretty good odds that it's other than blue because there's 7 of them. So it'd be 7 out of 8 would be the probability that the spinner stops on a color other than blue. The probability it stops on blue would be 1 out of 8, but other than blue would be 7 out of 8. What is the probability that the spinner stops on a number greater than 10? Well, if we look at these numbers, we've got 20,000, 50, 700, 370, 100, 500. Pretty good odds. I'd say 100% odds that it's going to be greater than 10. So it'd be 8 out of the 8 times. Say you spin the spinner 20 times, it says. It stops on green twice. What is the experimental probability of stopping on green? So theoretically, it should be 2 out of 8. But the experimental probability was actually, it stopped on green twice out of 20. So 2 over 20, which would become 1 over 10 as lowest terms. So that is considerably less than the 2 over 8, which is the theoretical probability. You spin the spinner 100 times, it stops on red 40 times. What is the experimental probability of stopping on red? So again, we're looking at the experimental probability, so we're looking at this. So it stops on red 40 out of 100 times. So that would be 4 out of 10 or 2 out of 5. Good. Okay, what are the odds in favor of stopping on the number 100? Remember, odds don't have the total. They just have favor, in favor. So stopping on number 100, there's only 1 out of 8 out of that. So, but we don't have the 8 on there. We have odds in favor, which would be 1, and odds against, which would be the rest of would be 7. So 1 out of 7. And this would be odds against stopping on blue. So odds against stopping on blue, there's only 1 in blue. So the odds against that would be 7 to 1. Because only 1 time is in favor of it stopping on blue. So 7 are unfavorable, and it's odds against. So that is on top. The last page here. You are making greeting cards and selling them to your friends. You use blue paper and pink paper. You also use crayons and markers. Your friends pick a greeting card at random from your bag. Okay, so what is the probability that your friend chooses a pink card? So first we need it's probability, we need to find totals. So there'd be 7 of these, 13 of these, so there's 20 in total. So the probability of getting a pink card would be 5 plus 2, which would be 7 out of 20. Good. What is the probability that your friend chooses a card made with crayons? Crayons are 7 and 5, so that would be 12 out of 20. So 12 out of 20, which would be 6 out of 10, which would be 3 out of 5. Okay. What is the probability the friend chooses a pink card with a marker? So that would be 2 out of 20, which lowest terms would be 1 out of 10. And what are the odds against picking a blue card with a crayon? Say blue card with a crayon. Odds for are 7. So odds against would be 13 to 7. Because the 13 are odds against, or odds not unfavorable outcomes and favorable outcomes. So notice they add up to the total, but they don't include the total. Okay, and the odds in favor of picking a pink card with a crayon. Pink card with a crayon is 5. And odds in favor would be 5 to 15, which would be, in lowest terms, 1 to 3. 1 out of 3 for that one. So that is the first lesson on probability.